Blair County or has a preliminary hearing and the charges are bound to court, a preliminary conference date will be scheduled. I don't expect that date necessarily. I don't expect us to be transporting the defendant until his charges are concluded in New York.
When does he enter a plea in this case?
A defendant doesn't have to enter a plea, and I would have absolutely no idea what his intentions are for his Blair County case. Other than it taking extra time, not really. He wanted some of the language changed and didn't agree to say that he was treated nicely by the police officers at all times. But, you know, we had sent that paperwork out, I think, Tuesday, so everyone could review it. And it was, as you saw today, at 9:15 where the questions were raised. Sir?
Yeah, I was going to ask more about the customizations that were made to the forms. Was that the extent of them? Or what were the customizations made to the waiver form?
There was an acknowledgement that a writ of habeas corpus had been filed and was being withdrawn. There was an acknowledgement that he had an attorney, and I think there were redactions about some of our normal language about the treatment of police.
So will you be tolling the charges?
Excuse me?
Will you be tolling the charges here locally in Pennsylvania and then in New York?
Yeah, as I stated earlier, our intention is to keep our case active, and at the conclusion of the New York case, which obviously is the primary case against the defendant, and we intend to assist them in any manner that they might need, you know, we'll evaluate our case and determine how to proceed.
Why has Mangione been held at SCI Huntington and not the Blair County prison?
That was a determination by all of the parties involved as the best course of action for a number of reasons.
Does that include the conditions of the Blair County prison?
That was one of the considerations. Yes, sir.
Would you go over the, you talked about an agreement in terms of waiving the preliminary hearing, having to do with turning over a 20-page Altoona Police Department report. Could you just sort of describe that, what happened, what was the exchange?
Yeah, we would typically have sent that out in about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Depends on when we get them from the police. The Altoona Police Department is typically very prompt in sending us that material, and then we send it directly to the defense attorney. There was a request for materials Monday. We agreed that if the report was available, we would turn that over, and to the Altoona Police Department work to finalize that report. Reports will be added to over time. So as if there are additions to the report, that'll get turned over as well, just through our normal course of business. But essentially, they got it probably 2 weeks faster than they normally would have because the Altoona Police Department expedited their delivery of the report to us.
And did they get it? Did you turn that over? Has that happened?
Yeah, I handed it to him right in court. Yes, ma'am.
Are you willing to offer Mr. Mangione a plea deal on his charges here in Blair County?
We're always willing to resolve a case. It's typically it's always up to the defendant as to whether they want to resolve a case or go to trial. That will be his decision to make. Yes, sir.
Can you explain what changed in the past couple of weeks? First, he said he would not be making an extradition, that he was challenging. Today, his attorney said that things have changed, and he explained that he was no longer concerned about the representation that his client would have in New York. What, from your perspective, did or did not change?
I have no idea, and that's why I don't comment on, even if a defense attorney tells me this is what we intend to do. When you folks ask what is happening, I say I'm not sure, because if it's the defendant's decision, that is their decision for them and their counsel to decide. They can change their mind whenever they want. I'm not privy to why they do it or when they do it. I just have to show up to court and be ready to proceed with the hearing, which we were.
Given the severity of the charges he's facing in New York, why is your office still prosecuting the offenses in Blair County?
Well, he committed crimes in Blair County. He's charged with committing crimes in the state of New York. They're allegations at this point, but we're not in the practice of just dismissing charges simply because someone has more serious charges somewhere else. That might be an older school approach. It might be a little antiquated, but I might be both of those things. Yes, sir.
There's been some news reporting that federal prosecutors are considering bringing federal charges against him as well. Have you been in touch at all with any federal?
I have not spoken to any federal officials about Mr. Mangione, absent casual conversation with a few FBI agents the Monday he was apprehended, and they certainly didn't discuss any of that with me.
And if they were to request materials or evidence from you, is that something you can share?
We'll cooperate with all law enforcement agencies as we always do.
Will he have the opportunity to appear virtually in February when he comes back, or will he have to come back here?
That'll be up to him and his attorney. There would be a couple different options. He could continue the proceedings. If he's not available, we would certainly certify that to the court, and we've done that in the past. But that, that will be part of our ongoing, conversations with the Manhattan County DA's office.
Do you have any details on the extradition process right now?
We relinquished him to the custody of the New York City Police Department, and they'll be taking him back to New York City in a safe and secure manner.
Is that happening right now, today?
It's happening forthwith, yes. We transferred them.
Do you have any comment on Mangione behavior?
No, I don't comment on defendants' behaviors, what their intentions are, and what choices they make, because that's his decisions, his behavior, and I don't know why someone does what they do. That's up to them.
Sir, you said earlier that the Blair County case is going to kind of be on hold until the New York case is concluded. But I was going to ask, is the 24th hearing still on then? Or how does that work out?
In Blair County, we have large hauls of the list for many cases at one time, pretty routinely. That 24th date is the first of those times, so there would probably be between 200 and there'll be several hundred cases called that day, and essentially they're statused. So the case could be continued, it could be addressed remotely. There are a lot of options, and frankly, depending on his availability, it would be probably up to Attorney Dickey and Mr. Mangione as to whether he continues or appears virtually.
So at what point would it be paused, if it is?
The two factors would be his attorney requesting a delay, if they believe that's in his best interest, or the Commonwealth indicating that he's not available because the other prosecution and prosecuting entity can't produce him at this time.
How do you get transported back to New York? When you said NYPD, is it road, is it helicopter, do you know how?
In the manner determined by the New York City Police Department to be the safest and most secure.
What's been your reaction to a lot of the negative attention the city of Elton has received? People say police should have just turned a blind eye, or that person in McDonald's should have just minded their own business.
I'm grateful that the police did their job. I'm grateful that that citizen, like so many other citizens in Blair County, said something when they saw something. And I would echo the sentiments of several other people, including our governor. We can all disagree with each other, but we should disagree with each other civilly, and we should never use violence to effectuate a disagreement. I understand these are allegations only against Mr. Mangione, but I certainly, violence to, make your point is never acceptable in our country, in our system of justice.
Going off of that, there are people outside right now who are in Luigi Nintendo hats holding these signs showing support for him. What do you say to that?
That's their right as Americans to do that, as long as they do it peaceably.
Procedurally and legally, am I right in understanding, Mr. Dickey, withdrew the habeas petition in the context of the extradition, but reserved the right to file another one? So what, are these two different habeas?
They're two different things. Attorney Dickey filed a habeas corpus petition relative to the defendant's extradition and was contesting extradition, which is his right to do. The Commonwealth was working with the New York City Police Department and Manhattan District Attorney's Office to secure the necessary paperwork, which we do relatively frequently in the course of business in our office. We frequently extradite people to Blair County and send people to other states in the regular course of business. At any time, a defendant can change their mind and decide to waive that, which eliminates the need for that habeas hearing. And that's what happened today. For his preliminary hearing, because we wanted to turn the defendant over to New York as soon as possible today, we had agreed immediately that if there was a waiver of the preliminary hearing, we would agree to what's called a reservation of habeas corpus rights, which is specific to the Pennsylvania Rules of Criminal Procedure. Typically, when a defendant waives the right to contest their prima facie case at the courthouse. In this instant, because of the wanting to turn him over to New York immediately, we agreed for them to be able to preserve that right. So at some time in the future, the defendant, could file a habeas corpus petition relative to his local charges here, and the Commonwealth would have to produce evidence and satisfy a common judge that we have a prima facie case, or essentially a probable cause case, for all the charges levied against the defendant. Yes, sir.
Sir, when you guys were in chambers for about 45 minutes in between both hearings, which judge were you speaking with?
The judge that presided over the extradition process, which was Judge David Consiglio.
Can we ask about the topics discussed?
The topics were limited to Attorney Dickey's request to have a custom extradition form, which he did not have, and he requested the judge type up for him, which the judge accommodated and had that typed up.
What's on that custom extradition form? Like, customized about it?
Just what we said earlier, that an acknowledgement that there was a habeas file, that he had an attorney, that he withdrew it.
Do you see any possibility for additional criminal charges in Blair County?
Don't speculate on additional criminal charges.
And the Altoona police document, the 20-page document that you got from them that you turned over today,
Yes.
is there an explanation as to why Luigi came to Altoona?
This is still an ongoing criminal case, so I'm not going to comment on investigatory materials. We turn them over to defense attorneys because every defendant is entitled to see the evidence against them, and we always try to get that out to them through counsel as soon as possible when we receive it. But I don't comment on that to the media. Yes, sir.
One of the points of conversation or the changes that they wanted to make to that waiver was removing the acknowledgement that he was treated properly by police so that there was no issues. Can you elaborate any more on what sort of issues he might have experienced or the reason that they wanted that language removed?
No, I don't believe he experienced any issues at all. I'm not going to speak to Attorney Dickey's motivations to the last-minute demand for changes, but we certainly wanted to go forward today with the waiver of extradition, and we're willing to accommodate because, as you saw, there was a large contingent of folks and officers from the New York City Police Department that came down here. The Pennsylvania State Police provided resources. The Altoona Police Department provided resources. The Sheriff's Department's been working around the clock since Mangione's apprehension. Our office has devoted resources. The Hollidaysburg Borough Police Department devoted resources. So the first assistant and I certainly were willing to accommodate a request for Attorney Dickey to have his own form if that effectuated the transfer of custody of the defendant.
Is the police report available publicly?
No.
Did you say he's being transported to New York right now? Do you know where he's going to be held?
I do not.
People might roll their eyes at me for this question, but just so I make sure I understand legally, if his prosecution is proceeding in New York and they can't transport him, does that toll Rule 600, or how does that work if it's not like a defense request or a joint request?
That's a fair question. Rule 600 requires the Commonwealth to exercise due diligence. So ultimately, the interpretation or determination as to whether we exercise due diligence would be determined by a judge. But I've always held the position that as long as we're in position to bring someone back from a surrounding state or state anywhere, if we're willing to do that and they indicate they're not available at this time, I've always argued that that's due diligence. I will argue that in this case. I certainly think as a practical matter, it would have been laughable and a waste of resources and time for us to try to keep this defendant here for our charges and delay New York's custody of the defendant for the more serious case.
Pete, how has this been for you, your office, dealing with all of the media that's here today, media from all over the world or Little Hollinsburg? How has this been for you and for your
Well, you folks have been very nice to us, which we appreciate. We certainly don't try to get into the spotlight, and we certainly look forward to getting back to a lot of work that needs to get done for our cases. But there has been interruptions to the normal course of business, but those were necessary interruptions, and we certainly understand the interest in the case.
I was actually going to ask someone about that. You listed numerous resources that were used on this case. What sort of strain has that put on not just the DA's office, but on all of the offices here in the courthouse?
Well, we are lucky in Blair County all the time. We have police officers who they don't complain, they work extra, they show up when they're asked, and that's what's happened over the past 2 weeks. Police officers have worked extra shifts, police departments have volunteered help, everyone's worked together. There hasn't been any, pushing or shoving, so to speak, as to who gets to do what. It's been a cooperative effort. I've always been grateful for that. And because of that, I would say it's been more work. It certainly has taken resources, but it's been accomplished very smoothly because of the cooperation of everybody.
Going forward, will Attorney Dickey represent Mangione in ongoing Pennsylvania?
I have absolutely no idea what Attorney Dickey or Mr. Mangione will elect to do. Those are decisions for them that I have no say in, and I'm not going to speculate on that.
Do you believe Mr. Mangione can receive a fair trial here, given sort of the public interest in the case?
In America, there's a fair trial everywhere when the rules are followed, and I certainly would have no doubt that the rules would be followed in New York as they would be followed here. You'd be surprised how many people don't read the papers, and even when they do, when you've done the number of trials that First Assistant Smith and I have done throughout our careers, the questions juries ask in trials, even high-profile trials, show me that they're paying attention, they're conscientious, and they really want to evaluate the evidence. So I have no doubt that he can receive a fair trial.
What's been the most challenging aspect of this case for you, for your office, and for the wider community?
The challenges for our office is just that we're short-staffed and we have a pretty high caseload per capita in Blair County. So it's just been, the resource issue. But other than that, these things are something we do all the time in our office. They just don't normally get attention, and certainly not this level of attention. But there are things we do in the normal course of business.
Just to wrap up, could you give us like a 20-second summary of what comes next in the Blair County trial?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of your sentence, sir.
Would you mind giving us like a 20-second summary of what comes next in the Blair County trial?
Well, because of the defendant's reversal today and decision to waive his preliminary hearing, as well as his extradition, certainly we believe it's in the interest of justice to turn him over to the New York City Police Department and Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which we did. He is now in their custody. He will go forthwith to New York to await trial or prosecution for his homicide and related charges in New York. We intend to keep our case active, and we intend to essentially revisit the case when the defendant is available for prosecution in Blair County, and we'll assess that at the appropriate time. Thank you, guys.